I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
Makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
I'm not worth your McDonald's money.
Nation, Waldorf Nation. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. All right, so it's Tuesday. Feels like a Monday, but it's a Tuesday. Hopefully, everybody enjoyed, or well, most of you enjoyed your Memorial Day weekend. Of course, we have bad news involving that in Florida. Another mass shooting, because of course. Great. So we have that. We're also going to get into the debt ceiling. Yes, the debt ceiling, the made-up BS, bullcrap, crisis. That's basically just a cover for austerity. Well, guess what? We're getting some austerity. Of course we are. You're not going to be surprised. What is being left alone in that deal and what is being cut? I know. Shocker, right? Now, before we get into that, there was something that was positive that happened over the weekend as well. And that is Republicans actually holding one of their own accountable in Texas, of all things. In fact,
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
down goes Ken Paxton. What? Texas's top cop has been impeached, which means effectively he's being removed from office. There will be a trial later. We do not know what the outcome of that trial will be. But again, Texas, when you impeach someone, they immediately get removed from that position. And then, again, pending the trial, we'll see what happens there. But he is facing some pretty serious charges. I had laid them out on Friday, on Friday's show. You can check out that video on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. With that, look at that. A little bit of accountability. Wow. But wait, let's not get it, too ahead of ourselves. They are Republicans after all. Okay, anyway. So, let's start out first with Republican austerity, including sending the children back to work. How Kevin McCarthy wants lazy kids, yes, lazy children, to go get a job. Wow. All right, so we're going to start out with that. Then we have Fox News Insanity saying stupid things, of course. Not surprising. Student loan debt, we're going to touch on that. Ron DeSantis getting criticized for a mass shooting. And then we have Christian homeschoolers actually moving away from that, realizing that they had been indoctrinated and moving away from it. It's a really, really fascinating story from the Washington Post. Really interesting stuff, so we're going to get to that. Now, yeah, more slave labor stories. Yes, exactly. So here we go. Now, before we get into the stories, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. Helps us out, as always. With that said, let's do it. Ron DeSantis. Well, you know, apparently that's one of the names that keeps sticking. Ron DeSantis. Could be Ron Disaster or Meatball Ron. Meatball Ron. Puddin' Ron. I prefer Puddin' Ron. I don't know why. Because he likes putting his hands in things that he, you know, that obviously he should not be putting his hands in. Just saying.
Sexual anarchy.
No, I'm not saying that, though. Not saying that. No evidence of that. To be fair. Anyway. There is a new and completely expected development in the debt ceiling theater drama. That drama, of course, along with the debt ceiling, is completely made up, BS, and meant to usher in horrible austerity policies in the name of avoiding catastrophic default on our debt, which would never happen because if it did, the stock market would tank, taking the vast majority of Congress members' stock portfolios with it. Yes, yet you remember, there's a lot of people, a majority in Congress, that have investments in the stock market that would be wiped out completely if the U.S. were to default on its debt, meaning that it would never happen, ever. That said, it is a useful vehicle for inflicting, punishing austerity measures on average working class people, which is exactly what they're doing. Now, over the holiday weekend, House Leader Kevin McCarthy and President Joe Biden announced a last-minute deal with each other to lift the debt ceiling for 2 years. Ooh. That is, of course, until after the next presidential election. No dollar figure at all tied to it, just 2 years. 2 years. So they could do this. I mean, they don't have to do this at all. They don't have to pass debt limit increases. They could just, they don't have to do it. They could increase it forever to the end of time. The 14th Amendment, it's constitutional, says that, you know, you should not question the debt at all. The debt that we will pay our debts. That's it. The full faith and credit of the United States. So this is just all nonsense. But anyway, in this deal, the agreement keeps non-defense spending completely flat for the next year. So if you were hoping for, you know, increased help from the government to offset things like greedflation, then you're SOL. You're not going to get any help. There will be a 1% rise, however, in 2025, which will not outpace inflation. Unsurprisingly, it also gives even more money to defense contractors because, of course, it does, which increases the defense budget, or offense budget, I should say, to $886 billion. While there is one good thing in here, it gives full funding for the medical care of veterans, so that's good. And by the way, it also increases it. So, hey, wonderful. Great. We shouldn't renege on that promise, and it would look really bad if a debt ceiling deal that happened right before, or I should say, right around Memorial Day, didn't include healthcare funding for our troops. Yeah. Now, the defense increases, also are happening without any tax increases. That means, well, they're going to have to start cutting in order to get, the Republicans' goals for debt reduction from other places. That means, of course, cutting social programs. So now the White House estimates that government spending would be reduced by at least $1 trillion, according to the Associated Press. Some of that spending comes from work requirements on programs. Now, I want to show you a video here. This is House Leader Kevin McCarthy basically explaining why they have put in work requirements for children into this bill. Take a look.
In this family, we may have a child that able-bodied, not married, no kids, but he's sitting on the couch collecting welfare. We're going to put work requirements on that individual, so he's going to have work requirements. He's going to get a job, and it's going to make the life easier.
Yeah. We may have a child, able-bodied, sorry. And this child, we're gonna have that child get a job. Wait, what? What is he talking about? Well, he's talking about sending poor children to work. Children that are in poor families that are receiving assistance will go to work. I'm not kidding here. I'm not kidding. That's exactly what they're doing. Again, they want to fill positions in fast food and they want to fill positions in meat packing. That is what they're doing 100%. Now, look, this entire thing is not about reducing any spending. No, work requirements in reality would make the tiniest little dent in the amount of overall federal spending, while having absolutely no impact on long-term employment outcome. So putting all these work requirements in for, again, able-bodied adults, and apparently now children involved, wouldn't really do anything to address the debt, because it's not the main driver of debt. The main driver of the debt is a military-industrial complex, defense spending, and giant, massive tax cuts for rich people. Now, the changes, though, would apply to Medicaid, the SNAP program, and the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, formerly known as welfare. The new rules would deny benefits to some childless adults without disabilities unless they work, volunteer, or enroll in training for at least 20 hours per week. Now, the thing is, SNAP and TANF already have work requirements along those lines, but Republicans would make them more strict, of course. But again, it's not about that. It is about sending poor children into the workforce. As outlined by the lever, McCarthy's work requirement proposal comes straight from the Foundation for Government Accountability, a conservative think tank that has helped secretly draft several state bills to roll back child labor laws. Wait, what? One such bill in Iowa would allow 14-year-olds to perform non-incidental work in meat freezers and 15-year-olds to perform light assembly work as long as the assembly is not performed on machines or in an area with machines, according to NBC News. The bill, which has not been yet signed by the governor of Iowa, appears to violate federal labor laws, according to Labor Department officials. 1 week before Republicans released their current debt ceiling proposal, the FGA released new polling in favor of these work requirements. More than 70% of likely voters support expanded work requirements for cash welfare benefits and food stamps, as well as new work requirements for Medicaid. The following week, McCarthy proposed expanding those work requirements and imposing new work requirements on Medicaid in his debt ceiling package. So this, again, if you're a part of this family, part of a family who has a 15-year-old or 16-year-old child in these states that now say, go ahead and do labor laws. Roll back them labor laws. It's fine. Apparently, in order to get benefits, that child has to be working for your family to get food stamps, or else they cannot. Wow. Well, as far as I understand it, now the organization, by the way, that I mentioned is, what was it? The FGA is unsurprisingly backed by wealthy corporate interests, wealthy donors. Now, their aim is twofold. They don't want to see their taxes go up, obviously, because they never do. And secondly, they want to lower wages. They want to drive wages down. And they say that they're having a very difficult time filling some of these, lower wage jobs. And instead of raising wages and having better work requirements, their solution has been to bring the children into the workplace so they can legally pay them less than adults. And since, of course, they will also create more competition for those jobs, as, there will be, it's not happening now, but there will at some point be a shrinking labor market. There will be more competition for these jobs. Therefore, when you have adults who are requiring at least $15 an hour in some states, and other states it takes much more just to have a baseline of living for, these living wages, right? Just to be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment, to be able to afford to feed themselves, to afford, some sort of rudimentary healthcare, maybe, or something, just to be able to afford the basics of surviving in this country, need a certain amount of money. That's why we call it a living wage. If you're having adults that require that have to compete with children who do not have to legally work for a living wage, well, either the children are going to win out, or the adults are going to have to take a massive pay cut and get multiple jobs, which I'm pretty sure is the whole point. And pretty sure why these companies are funding these organizations that are lobbying politicians directly with bills to loosen child labor laws. That's it. So they're sending the kids to work because they will work more cheaply than adults, and it will drive wages down. And again, it will save them money in the long term. That's what it is. And it's just as horrifying as you could imagine. Yeah. How much lower are they wanting to go? Back to $5.50 an hour? They want to go as low as humanly possible. So, yeah. Okay. More like capitalism. Fox News host Rachel Campos Duffy believes that public schools might be using COVID funds to spoil their students with saunas.
Parents at a New York City public school say it's overcrowded with migrants and can no longer provide proper programs. As a third grader writes a letter to her superintendent, and we have a quote here: "Dear Superintendent Samuels, I'm a third grader at Public School 145, and I love my school. I have been there since pre-K. This year, we lost our library, music room, and STEAM room, and I'm happy that we have a lot of new kids, but it's not okay that we don't have enough space. Please work with our school to help us get more space." Expect from an 8-year-old. No hate in their heart whatsoever, but they're pointing to a problem, which is, hey, if you're going to invite a whole lot of more people here, we got to have somewhere to have school.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get over the fact that they have a steam room. Did I read that right?
Yeah, maybe I read that wrong. I don't know.
Wow, school's changed. Maybe we did give them too much COVID money.
I'd be surprised if at PS 145 on.
Maybe we read that. I don't know. Oh, I don't know what steam room is, but I know what a steam room is. That sounds. Anyway, let's.
Wow.
Testicles.
Okay, I did not mean to push that button.
You idiot.
Stupid. Wow. Steam rooms. And by the way, that whole thing, you heard the whole, pretty much the whole discussion right there. See, it's the migrants that are pushing them out. And then pointing out that the child, that 8-year-old, and bless her heart, no hate in her heart, right? Unlike you ghouls, who obviously have a lot of hate in your heart, because you're making the whole segment about, oh, those migrants are pushing the children out. No, kids like, hey, we don't have enough room. I love the new children. I love the new students. We just need more room. Okay, get them bigger rooms. I mean, that's not difficult, but instead, their solution is obviously kick out the migrants. Of course. Now, let's get to the stupid. All right. Where did this woman get the idea that COVID money was spent on steam rooms or saunas? Well, I mean, for one, she's not very bright. I think that's pretty simple. But okay, maybe the word steam room threw her off. Now, what does STEAM stand for? In the school context, it stands for science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. STEAM. Now, the fact that they have a STEAM room means that they've had to combine it all into one room. That kind of points out the fact that it's overcrowded. If you've got to put all that in one room, then yeah, that would speak to the whole problem of overcrowding, which has been a problem for schools for a very long time. Overcrowded classrooms, overworked teachers. Teachers that, have too many students put into one classroom because you're not being able to hire enough teachers to teach students, or, you're not being able to hire enough quality teachers because the pay is so terrible. I mean, the United States has incredibly poor, very, very poor teachers. We don't pay them enough. Especially when you compare them to, our European counterparts that actually do value education. But we don't. But anyway, so now, and look, by the way, that fact is very well apparent when you're watching the type of discourse that you see on Fox News. That boy, did our public schools, they failed so many people because they're not funded. They're not funded. Okay, anyway, so now let's get to COVID funding. She said, we must have given them too much COVID funding. Now, let's talk about the debt ceiling deal for a minute. There's about $30 billion in unspent COVID relief funds from a variety of federal programs that are being clawed back by this debt ceiling deal if it gets signed into law. So now many of this funding, again, is COVID era. And basically it was there to help schools in mainly disadvantaged areas, but again, mainly schools help to recover from COVID and do some updates and upgrades and things to like air ventilation and all that stuff. So now, none of this money went to building saunas. I'm just saying, none of it. Now, let me give you an example of one school district and show you what they were actually doing with this. Now, the Detroit public school system received a lot of federal funding from federal COVID relief programs. So what they did with it is that they funded after-school enrichment programs to help students recover from learning that was lost during the pandemic. One of those programs is an after-school debate team, which I think is fantastic. Again, not only are you teaching children about debate, but you're also giving them a program and keeping them off the streets and out of trouble. That's brilliant. That's wonderful. And it is helpful. And it also helps with things like critical thinking. Now, there is money that is unspent. And it's not because these school districts don't need it. So now, whenever there is a large amount of money that is given out from these federal programs to schools, for example, they got to be careful, and they know this. And so they're like, we want new programs, we want new, funding, we want to do some things, but we also want to make sure that whatever we do with the money is sustainable, because we know that federal money is not going to be there forever. So we're going to set up sustainable programs, and also we're going to do the things that, like repairs and updates to our ventilation systems, et cetera, but we're not going to go crazy. So they've been trying to find ways to spend this money effectively and to set up something, again, that was sustainable. Now, one of the issues they've run into is not the fact that they can't find things to spend it on, it's the fact that they have deadlines. And they can't just spend all this money at once. And so there's these deadlines that if you don't use the money, then you lose it. But they're afraid of setting up programs and spending all this money and then having those programs hit a fiscal cliff and get yanked away. So they hate that idea. And so they've been very careful to try to spend wisely. As Bridge, Michigan explains, the state's highest poverty districts, which receive by far the most funding per student, are taking the longest to spend the funds amid supply chain disruptions and a tight labor market. Those are the other issues too. Not only, again, are they trying to find sustainable programs, but also places can't find, teachers. They can't get the things in time because of supply chain issues, right? And Bridge, Michigan continues by saying, even districts that budgeted carefully and avoided long-term spending commitments that couldn't be sustained without federal support will see disruptions from the loss of short-term programming that has been critical to the COVID recovery effort. And that, again, it relates to the clawbacks as well. So, in reality, public schools have been, again, very, very careful about not misspending or misappropriating federal COVID relief money. They have been spending money on things that, they can afford in the long run and avoiding spending money on things that, they would love to have, but know that they cannot sustain in the long run. So now you want to compare that, right? So if you're complaining about COVID money being misspent, then you should be looking more at the Paycheck Protection Program, that kind of funding. See, that was doled out to corporations and businesses. Now, some businesses did use it to pay employees and to stay in business. That's what it was there for. Unfortunately, you had a lot of bigger companies, bigger corporations, and just fraudsters coming in and, completely misappropriating it. Look, they did billions of dollars in stock buybacks and then fired a lot of people. A lot of stories of that. In fact, it's estimated that around $100 billion of the more than $800 billion in Paycheck Protection Program loans were actually fraudulent because there was very little oversight. And again, you had a lot of businesses that took this money that didn't actually need it and used it to enrich themselves, the executives. So if you want to have a conversation about who's misappropriating, misspending this COVID relief money, again, it's not the schools, it's not the teachers, it's not average people, it's corporate America. Schools are not getting saunas. No, you're only thinking of corporate board members. They're the ones who got the saunas. As usual, Fox News fail. You need to redefine how you fund schools altogether. Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree with that. You know that. That's been my position for quite some time. Because right now, you point out correctly that the current funding method for schools is very regressive and ends up of course, in poor areas having poorer schools. But that is not what we were talking about in this context. We were talking about federal COVID funding, which came from the federal government as a result of things like the CARES Act. So, again, different. The PPE and the PPP funding, where did that money go? A lot of it went into corporate executive accounts. And to be fair, actually about something like 90% of the money was repaid because it was... No, I'm sorry. It was forgiven. Like 90% of that money was forgiven by the federal government. And so, yeah, it generally did went to corporate profits. So, oops. That sucks. The bunny. Yes, the bunny. I've been known for having the best words, the greatest words.
I know words. I have the best words.
It's true. It's true. Okay. Oh, well, apparently the arts are, not useful for society, according to conservatives. But no student loan forgiveness? Yeah, let's talk about that, actually. If you're one of the millions of Americans who are still not prepared to resume paying back your student loans, I have bad news for you. Unfortunately, the debt deal involves a hard date to start paying back your student loans. Now, the debt ceiling deal made between President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has ensured that there will no longer be a pause on student loan debt repayment. Now, it essentially codified what the administration has already said, that there will be no more student loan debt repayment pauses. Details of the debt ceiling deal were released on Sunday in the form of a 99-page bill that would suspend the nation's debt limit through 2025 to avoid what would never have happened, a federal default. They just used this thing as theater in order to push more austerity measures. And congratulations, they pushed a lot more austerity. Yes, of course. So now, the GOP proposal, by the way, had originally planned to rescind Biden's plan to waive $10,000 to $20,000 in debt for nearly our borrowers. That did not make it into the package, but that doesn't mean that student loan debt relief is going to happen. Currently, there are two cases in the conservative-dominated Supreme Court that could spell the end of Biden's student loan debt relief package, and we will all be, as student debtors, screwed. Screwed. Yeah. Basically, yes. Now, that's why people are frustrated, because this debt ceiling just puts what Biden had said before through Cardona. It codified it and said, well, okay, let's give you the details, right? Now, Biden has agreed to put an end to the pause on student loan repayment. The bill states that the pause will end 60 days after June 30th, meaning payments would resume in the final days in August. And so that is, again, what he had already said, but this, when signed into law, will become 100% the plan. So now look, the Supreme Court, as I mentioned, they're hearing two cases. And before the deal, one could think that, hey, if the cases fell through, if the Supreme Court rejected it, like we're assuming that they're going to, not because of the merits are bad, but because of the fact that it's a conservative Supreme Court and they hate us. They hate all people who are not them. Biden would at least have the ability to, pause the loans. Now he does not, if this gets signed into law. To me, that tells me he never really planned on making another extension, regardless of what happened. And so that's disastrous. Again, the Supreme Court looks like they're going to reject it. Again, not because it has no merit, as I mentioned before. In fact, one of the cases... Okay, two of the cases here. One of them involves two students who, again, say that, we're not going to be, we're not going to get the full, result of this, and so we're going to make sure that no one else gets helped if we're not going to get helped. So that's, again, greed, getting mad that other people are going to get helped when you're not. Okay. And the other one is a bunch of states, Republican states, that say that they're going to lose tax revenue as a result of this. And yet the Supreme Court does not, let's just say that they're taking these arguments from the plaintiffs in the case much more seriously than they do the defense, which is, again, based on the HEROES Act in 2003, which says that Biden can, do these things, take these unilateral actions in the event of an emergency, which the emergency, of course, was COVID. So now, look, the result of this, of course, is you're going to have millions of people who are not financially prepared to begin resuming payments on student loans. So now detractors will ask, well, what do you mean? You've had years without having to pay your loans. You signed up to pay the loans. These are predatory loans, for one. Okay. A lot of people, when they're younger, don't exactly know what they're signing up for. It's filled with a lot of legalese in these payments. And of course, you're thinking, well, I'm going to be able to get a job, so I'll be able to pay it back. Sure, no problem. Except that things hardly tend to work out. Maybe 18-year-olds making the decision to take out these thousands of dollars or tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans, or at least tens of thousands of dollars, that because of interest then snowball into hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of loans, when again you are 18 and fresh out of high school. Maybe not the best idea to have a system that is based on that. Maybe a better idea would actually to be to completely eliminate having to get student loans by making colleges, again, these are, public colleges and universities, completely tuition free. Prevent students from even having to take out loans by actually having school be paid for. I know. Crazy idea, right? Real nutso stuff over here.
Pink-haired communist.
It would, again, eliminate the need for a additional bailout, which, again, some people point out, hey, look, if you're just going to forgive student loans, then what's going to prevent these colleges from keeping on raising the tuition and then loading up everybody else, the next generation with a ton of debt, which will then be forgiven. That's a good point. This is why we should make schools tuition free. Solves both of those problems, wouldn't it? First of all, again, you eliminate the debt and you change the way schools are funded. So you make sure that these schools are not able to charge tuition and people do not have to take out these student loans to be able to do it. But we're far from being able to do that, unfortunately. So now, the other topic here, the other thing to discuss is the fact that students not being able to pay is because of the fact that we've had massive greedflation. So you have this inflation. It is driven by corporate profits, meaning this inflation, the amount that it takes for you to be able to afford goods and services and rents and mortgage payments and all this. Well, if you're lucky enough to have a mortgage payment, most people are, unfortunately, are stuck renting, or a lot of people are, because of home prices are insane. But you have this issue where things are much more expensive and you really don't have wages that are matching, that are able to match this inflation. And so you're even further behind than you were before COVID, when there already was a student loan debt crisis. And so we're having that go on. Corporations making record profits. People are falling behind. People are not ready to pay. And yet Biden makes this deal with the Republicans that says, it doesn't matter, you will start paying in August. And now we have made sure that no matter what, if you get relief or not, you're going to have to pay. Disastrous policy. Now, the Debt Collective over on social media tweeted this: resuming student debt payments will crush working families and is simply bad policy. But agreeing to codify the pause as end of the law before the Supreme Court decides on broad-scale relief is criminal. Agreed. The nonprofit Student Debt Crisis Center wrote on Twitter, quote, "We are deeply concerned about the debt ceiling bill ending the pause on federal student loan payments. Take action now and tell POTUS to keep payments paused until debt is canceled." Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So, anyway. Now, look, here's the thing. We are still in an emergency. The federal government says we're not in an emergency, but we're still in an emergency. Now, the debt ceiling was not an emergency. It is a fake emergency. Do you understand? Because of a fake emergency, people that are facing a real emergency, a financial emergency, because of all this, again, reflation, all the stuff that's going on right now, the inability to pay student loans, and yet being forced to do so, and not getting any sort of debt relief, it's kind of BS. That's what's going on here. It's BS. The debt limit, made up crisis, used to force cuts on average working people who are just trying to navigate this system right now, of which our material needs are not being met, where we can barely afford things like childcare, can barely afford things like healthcare, if you're lucky enough to have it, and barely afford rents, food, gas, you name it. What they're doing is they're punishing average people. And yes, you might say, well, but Jeb, you don't understand. You people signed a contract. You agreed to pay them back. You agreed. Well, it's funny because Republicans also, thanks to the Constitution, in their oath to follow the Constitution, agreed to pay the full, debt of the United States, and yet they continue every opportunity they can have that they can try to use that debt limit as a way to force their regressive agenda, their austerity on everyone else, and Democrats go along with it all the time. So please, tell me about debts. Okay, tell me about, you signed a contract, you agreed to pay. We have so many situations where you have Republicans, where you have the right wing that have agreed to pay things or agreed to do things. Oh, and they didn't do it. Oh, and they reneged on it. And yet, average working people are always expected to pay their debts. Where you have tax cheats right now. One of the most frustrating parts about this, while they're going after students and ensuring that they pay down their debts, for taking out those student loans, you have tax cheats, people who do not pay the IRS their taxes that they owe, being able to get away with a lot of it. The IRS agents that President Biden wanted to increase funding for? Well, now he did get a small increase in the amount of IRS agents. I know the 87,000 IRS agents. The ones that are supposed to crack down on billionaire and millionaire tax cheats. He ended up having a cut in that as well. Now, Republicans said, no, we don't want any of those any of those IRS agents at all. We don't want to cut down on people cheating on their taxes because that's generally us, rich people. We don't have to pay what we owe. We're going to find our ways out of that. But you people who have taken student loans, you have to pay every single cent plus interest. Does that seem like a fair system to you? No, it isn't. It is a broken system, but it's broken on purpose to make sure that rich people don't pay and you do. And that's the truth of it. Okay. Moving on. Oh, yeah, the PPP loans. Yep, that's another one. Okay. Moving on. Florida Governor and presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is being criticized for a mass shooting that happened over the Memorial Day weekend. On Memorial Day, that's Monday, 9 people, including children as young as 1, were wounded in what is again another mass shooting, this time happening north of Miami. According to CBS News, 9 people were wounded Monday evening when gunfire erupted along a beachside promenade in Hollywood, Florida, sending people frantically running for cover along the crowded beach on Memorial Day. The shooting happened on the Hollywood oceanfront boardwalk near a convenience store, and a Ben & Jerry's ice cream store, and a Subway sandwich shop. Several children were among those injured, according to police spokesperson Deanna Beneneshi. And she said that 4 children between the ages of 1 and 17 were hit, along with 5 adults between the ages of 25 and 65. So again, here we have another random shooting. As far as I know, no fatalities. So at least that's one thing. But again, random shooting in the middle of Florida on Memorial Day. Now, that said, this is big news. It's national news. It's another mass shooting, which again happens all the time. Where's Governor Ron DeSantis? Apparently, he was too busy not talking about it. He's too busy doing his presidential campaign thing. That's right. Governor DeSantis, who was hosting a major event in Iowa on Tuesday, has not, of this recording so far, said a word. Not a tweet. Nothing. Not a statement on his government website. And it does not appear that he has spoken to reporters about this mass shooting. Perhaps, he's got to take time off eating pudding or, whatever he's doing. Terrible recordings with Elon Musk. I don't know. But, he's whatever he's doing, he might want to actually pay attention to things that are happening in Florida. But what do I know? So that said, his press secretary, by the way, decided to respond to some criticism here from California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom, who pointed out that DeSantis had recently signed a law to deregulate guns, specifically permitless carry. So now that would, of course, further expand the number of guns on the streets of Florida, at a time where apparently there's already enough guns. Now, that said, important piece of context here. That bill does not go into effect until July 1st. So now, right-wingers think, Gavin Newsom trying to blame that law. It's not in effect yet. We had a mass shooting before this event. That's not the own you think it is. That is not something to crow about. Fox News reported California Governor Gavin Newsom was fact-checked by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' spokesman after he blamed the Memorial Day shooting on Hollywood, Florida on laws DeSantis signed that are not yet in effect. Wow. Newsom reacted to reports of the shooting on social media, blaming gun violence on a bill DeSantis signed in April that eliminates the requirements for an individual to obtain a permit to carry a concealed firearm. DeSantis' personal spokesperson, Jeremy Redfern, on what he says is his personal account, tweeted, "Hey, Gavin, how does a law that doesn't take effect until July 1st change this outcome?" Well, I'll tell you one thing. Wouldn't have made anything safer. If anything, having this mass shooting happen before the gun laws being deregulated even further shows you that the gun laws in Florida were already too lax to begin with. So once that goes into effect, do you think it's going to get better or do you think it's going to get worse? Every single data point that you could point to from a credible source shows you that it's probably going to get worse. So now you've got more randos walking around with permitless, guns that are concealed. And everybody thinks that it's going to make safer? No more background checks. Everyone's, able to now walk around just, with their concealed handguns and all that stuff. Great. Wonderful. That's Florida for you. It's obviously, it's going to be a disaster. We know this. The more guns you have, the more shootings you have, the more gun violence you're going to have. But apparently that is okay with Governor Ron DeSantis. That is okay with many in the right wing because they're fine with more gun violence as long as they can have their guns and perhaps even participate in some of that violence and be justified in doing so, of course. So now, people on social media are going after DeSantis for ignoring this mass shooting while doing whatever the hell he was doing. 9 people were shot in Hollywood, Florida, and it sure as hell wasn't by drag queens. This is a brilliant response by one person on social media, given how Florida and DeSantis have been focusing so much on the woke. Well, it wasn't the wokers. They didn't do the mass shooting. The woke did not do the mass shooting. Okay, the woke does not do that. I don't know what else I can say other than it's not drag queens that are shooting people. It's not the wokeisms that is causing these mass shootings. No, it's lax gun laws. Obviously. I don't know how much more simply I can put this. I don't know. Okay, but anyway, look, more. In response, Ron DeSantis had laws changed so he could stay governor and run for POTUS, another social media user said. Meanwhile, he ignores what is happening in Florida. He hasn't said one word about this mass shooting. A 1-year-old was shot in his state this weekend. Ron, I think you should leave. Well, I mean, technically he is already in Iowa, so he might as well just stay there. Sorry, Iowa. Maybe you can have him. In response to another news report, another simply said, "Thank you, Ron DeSantis." Sarcastically. To all the DeSantis supporters out there, 9 people were just shot, and not one word from your precious governor, wrote another. Look, that's because Ron DeSantis doesn't care. He really doesn't. You know why? Because it doesn't affect him. That's it. It doesn't have an impact on his life, one way or the other, if you get shot. It just doesn't. He gets money from the NRA, by the way, and the gun lobby, and then when people shoot each other, his solution is more guns. Now, why is that a good thing? How does that help him? Well, he says more guns, so people go and buy more guns. When people buy more guns, there is naturally an increase in gun violence because more people have guns. When more people have guns and when more people are afraid and go buy guns, well, that increases the profits of gun manufacturers and the gun lobby, which then gives more money to Ron DeSantis. So this is an endless cycle of death and destruction that only works in certain people's favor. It doesn't work in favor of the average Floridian in this case, who's trying to walk down the boardwalk during Memorial Day. No, it works against them, but it works for the people who are powerful and who want money. That's what it always works for. And of course, by the way, the people who then take these guns that are deregulated and use it to do mass shootings. Okay. Moving on. Well, not sorry for you.
There's insanity in the control room.
Is there, though? Victims of conservative indoctrination are starting to reject homeschooling and sending their kids to public school. So this is an interesting story, a report from the Washington Post. Now, they profiled a couple of former hardcore evangelical Christians who were, in fact, homeschooled. So now they note that this couple and others that they know have been moving their children away from the things that they experienced through this homeschooling, which they called abusive and indoctrination. In fact, the couple had been taught growing up that public schools were demonic indoctrination camps aimed at destroying Christian families, which is hilarious because it's one of those, I don't know, I would say projection, but really it's one of those things where it's like every accusation is in confession. And when they accuse, public schools of indoctrinating children, well, that's what you're doing. You're doing the indoctrination. Now, after a crisis of faith, this couple, the Beale family, decided to send their 6-year-old daughter to an elementary school, a public elementary school near their Virginia home. And they do not regret it. In fact, they think that it was one of the best decisions that they have made, and have begun thinking about some of the educational opportunities that they had missed out by being homeschooled by their parents. So now, Aaron Beale told the Washington Post, quote, "People who think the public schools are indoctrinating don't know what indoctrination is. We were indoctrinated." So I think that's really important. That's a very important statement for the times that we're living in. Very, very timely. Okay? Because right now we're having a conversation, with the right wing, who is screaming right now about public schools. They're indoctrinating the kids. Oh, the culture is indoctrinating the children. They're turning them into the trans. They're turning them into the gay. We've got to do something about it. It's indoctrination. No, that's what you're doing. You're doing the indoctrination. Literally, the ones complaining and crying the most about it are the ones who are actually engaging in it. So, in fact, Aaron says, quote, "It's not even comparable." So, real indoctrination versus the fake, nonsense, BS, so-called indoctrination of basically just admitting that trans and gay people exist and shouldn't be murdered and should be allowed to live their lives. Yeah. So, anyway, now, the Beales had their first crisis of faith that actually involved the discipline of their children. So, just to show you kind of their evolution and to detail the steps here, and I think evolution is a pretty good term to use because, a lot of fundamentalist homeschooled Christians don't actually believe in evolution and teach against it. But in this case, this is an evolution not of just faith, but also of thought and of practice. And so I think it's really important to point this out. It started with what they were taught, what they were told on how to discipline their children, and the sort of discipline that they had received when they were children. So now they were taught essentially to physically assault their children. And they had a book, a manual. This book was To Train Up a Child, made by homeschooling authors Michael and Debbie Pearl. So this is the Pearl method. So part of the Pearl method includes or involves taking a switch and using it on literal babies. Yeah. So let's get into the details, right? So this is an actual quote from one of the editions of that book. And by the way, this has been through many different changes, many different editions, because one of the things the Pearls like to use is, "You're taking my quote out of context." So this is from the 17th edition, and I don't know exactly what edition that they're up to now, but let me give you a quote here from that. "At 5 months, she was too unknowing to be punished for disobedience, but for her own good and our peace of mind, we attempted to train her not to climb the stairs by coordinating the voice command of no with little spats on her bare legs. The switch was a 12 once long, 1/8 inch diameter sprig from a willow tree." So basically, she doesn't quite understand it, but it doesn't matter. She climbs the stairs, you get the switch. Oh, okay, well, now the book goes on to, describe some of the other situations in which you would use your discipline. For example, for babies that cannot sleep or refuse to sleep, they also get the switch. Quote, "But what about the grouchy child who would rather complain than sleep? Get tough. Be firm with him. Never put him down. And then for some reason, reverse your position, allowing him to get up. For your reputation with the child, you must follow through. He may not be able to sleep, but he can be trained to lie there quietly. He will very quickly come to know that any time he is laid down, there is no alternative but to stay put. To get up is to be on the firing line and get switched back down. So yeah, baby can't sleep, gets the switch. What about a 7-month-old that happens to be screaming? Well, you're not going to be surprised to know that they also get the switch. Quote, this is from the book from allegedly a 9-year-old. If he is old enough to pitch a fit, he is old enough to be spanked. Well, if you're looking at indoctrination, then this 9-year-old who said that, that would be, an example of somebody being indoctrination. Hey, I was beaten as a child. I was getting the switch. So guess what? You're a 7-month-old and you're screaming too loud. Well, guess what? You're going to get the switch too. Wow. Wait a minute. What about another one? Here's another situation that was in this book. You're babysitting a 15-month-old that, if you're babysitting, again, not your child, and you brought a toy that this child does not want to play with, what happens? Oh, you guessed it. He gets a switch. Quote, after about 10 acts of stubborn defiance, followed by 10 switchings, he surrendered his will to one higher than himself. Enrolling the wheel, he did what every accountable human being must do. He humbled himself before the highest and admitted that his interests are not paramount. After one begrudged roll, my wife turned to other chores. So yeah, kid doesn't play with the toy that you brought him, that doesn't have any interest in it. Doesn't matter. Your interests are not paramount at all. You go play with this toy that you don't want to play with, you get the switch. This couple, I don't think it's too far to go out and say that this couple literally wrote the book on child abuse. Just saying. Just saying. Now, that said, the couple, the Beals, they didn't want to constantly abuse their children. So they decided, we're not going to do it. We're going to skip that. Quote, when it came time for me to hit my kids, that was the first independent thought I remember having. This can't be right. I think I'll just skip this part. So I can see it now from The Simpsons, the independent thought alarm. Can't have that. That's probably what the church was saying.
Can't let that happen.
The independent thoughts, no. No, you must beat your children. You must put the fear of God in them. Well, actually, it would be the fear of the parent, which is what they're trying to do. But let's be clear, though. Fear is not the same as respect. If you want your children to respect you, you do not have to resort to physical violence in order to do it. Again, those are two different things. In fact, fear often leads to a lack of respect from your children. And you have to learn how to earn that respect and gain that respect. And not use it through the application of essentially what is violence. Anyway, so now, Aaron Beal said that, hey, I'm having these thoughts, right? And I'm getting these independent thoughts that are different from how I was brought up, and it's kind of disorienting. So anybody who's, by the way, like in the process of waking up or becoming woke, right? In this case, I think it's an applicable word. There's a disconnect there. There's some cognitive dissonance that goes along, and that can be very, very uncomfortable for people. But the Beals, I got to give them a lot of credit because they had to work through that and didn't just fall back into their old patterns, their old routines. They decided that, yes, this is very uncomfortable, and we're going to continue to meet this discomfort head on and continue to start questioning things. And I absolutely love that. Now, Aaron said, that, quote, it's like having the rug pulled out from under your feet. All of reality is kind of up for grabs. Now, all that questioning led to an eventual loss of faith, and that caused his wife, in turn, Christina Biel, to begin questioning her biblical literalism and patriarchal values that had been in childhood instilled within her. Now, she ended up keeping her religious faith, but losing and basically ejecting the rest, which is totally fine. If you have faith in something, whether, a God, a deity, it doesn't really matter what you believe personally, as long as you're not using it to harm other people. In fact, I think that if you have a faith, you should be using it to help other people, not harm them. Now, that said, there was a little bit of friction there at first. Christina recalled thinking, this is a guy I've been married to for 8 years. I know him. I know his heart. I know what kind of parent he wants to be to our kids. And, for people who are breaking out of that religion, there's obviously going to be a lot of gossip. There's going to be a lot of, the smaller the town, the more spicy the gossip, right? So I'm pretty sure that there were people, members of the church, members of the family, clergy, that see this, that saw Aaron's lack of faith, and they found it disturbing, right? And they decided to say, well, this guy obviously just wants to be a sinner. Duh. But she said this, quote, or she said that she wasn't buying this answer, and said, quote, these easy answers of, oh, you're just not a Christian anymore, you just want to sin, didn't work anymore on her. So again, they broke out of this homeschooled, fundamentalism. And while, again, Christina retains her values, or not values, sorry, retains her religious beliefs, Aaron doesn't, but they're still a family. And they still have shared values and how they raise their children and how they relate to each other, which, again, is perfectly fine. And you can have a wonderful, fulfilling relationship in that. Now, ironically, again, this is what happens when people get woke. They realize that the stuff they've been taught all their lives was crap. They don't have to believe in all these outdated, sometimes horrific notions. And it's not just the Beals. Beals are just one example. They say that they know of many homeschooling families that have drifted away from the religious dogma that have been imposed or on them, that they had been, wait for it, indoctrinated into. They woke up. They became the woke. They realized that not only that they were being abused by this very system, but they were also being turned into abusers themselves, abusing that next generation. And they didn't want to be a part of that. And by the way, that system is set up to self-perpetuate. The abused often in the next incarnation become the abusers, and then abuse the next generation, which then becomes the abusers, and on and on and it goes, right? And you have to, at some point, break that cycle if you want to end that abuse. And that's what happened here. The Beals have broken that cycle. They have ended that abuse. Now, as far as Christina, she said this about the system, quote, it is set up to hide the abuse, to make the victims of abuse invisible, and to strip them of any capability of getting help, and not just in a physical way. Now, in a lot of these, cults, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fears of being ostracized, removed from the group, losing your connections with, your friends and neighbors. There are people that have experienced things like having a trans child that has come out as openly trans and losing all of their community connections, their neighbors who were perhaps once nice people to them, becoming hateful bigots. Well, maybe not becoming, but, showing who they really are, showing what they've always been now that you are part of that group. You know what I'm saying? The mask comes off, I should say. And so you do see this happen, and there's understandably a lot of fear in breaking away from these dogmatic movements where there are people that are very much indoctrinated into that lifestyle and into those belief systems, and really do actually think, no, you don't understand. Atheists are the devil. Agnostics are the devil. Muslims are the devil. They're all terrible people. The groomers are coming for your children. They're coming to indoctrinate your children, when really they are the victims of said indoctrination, of a different kind of indoctrination, of the religious variety. So she said, quote, "At some point, you become so mentally imprisoned, you don't even realize you need help." And that is powerful. That is very powerful. And it's true. It's so incredibly true. I'm glad that they were able to break out. And I'm glad that they were able to actually question the indoctrination that they had been exposed to, the abuse that they had been exposed to. Now, a year after their daughter had started first grade, the couple decided to enroll their 3 other school-age children to public schools as well. And even their older daughter, their second, this is a second grader, right? Now to be, soon to be third grader. She actually wondered what it might have been like had the parents had the same opportunities to go to a public school instead of, again, being brought up in this very Christian, right-wing, patriarchal homeschool movement. She said, quote, "You should have just asked to go to school. It affects your whole life." I mean, yes, that's the simple answer. But as Christina said before, this kind of abuse becomes so normalized that you don't even know you're being abused. So how do you know to break out when all of this is just normal? And that's the result of indoctrination. That's how you know. And yet there are people out there, and I've covered plenty of these schools, who think, no, it's the gay community, it's the trans community, it's drag queens that are out there that are doing the indoctrination. They're indoctrinating children to become gay. No, that's not what's happening. You can't indoctrinate someone into that kind of life. It's just not, it's not a thing. It's not real. And actually, it's the opposite. The people that are screaming indoctrination the most are the ones who are doing it. Every accusation is a confession. What people are trying to do outside of these, again, I'm not saying all religion, but the hardcore right-wing conservative, Christianity, the Christian nationalism that is, full of people who are the proponents of, we've got to stop the groomers. We've got to stop the indoctrination. No, we've got to stop you guys and free people. Free people more like the Beals, right? In that process, so that they are like the Beals and others in that that have been profiled, are now free, are now, with facts and reality. Okay, anyway, that's it. So, let's see. I'm way over time, so sorry about that. I tend to go on a little too much. Okay, so please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Really, really appreciate it if you do so. As usual, we could use the help. All right, so no super chats today, and nothing on our Twitch feed. No super chats or member comments. I'm assuming, of course, that everything is working correctly. Yeah. All right. Thank you all. Have a good day. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
I'm not worth your McDonald's money.
There's insanity in the control room.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
How you like that, boy?
Who's got a hammer?
I will eat your ass.
It's like Sharknado, except it's food.
I like my meat tight. Tighten up my meat.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.
Disappointed.